I walk in and I look over and I see Rodney Marsh talking to Jeff Boycott. And Rodney Marsh has got his big bottle with him, you see. And I thought, interesting combination that. And then I thought to myself, Jesus, our wicketkeeper's pretty smart. He's found a non-drinker and taken his bottle over there so he doesn't have to share the bottle. I thought, he's pretty smart. Probably the funniest, well, it wasn't funny at the time, but there's always something funny. So Hilly told me two things when I started in television. He said, treat every microphone as being live. And he said, there are 4 words that you don't say on television. Well, I managed to swear in front of the microphone, and I managed to get 3 of those 4 words into one sentence.
Few names in Australian sport carry the same weight as Ian Chappell. Tough, outspoken and uncompromising, Chappell led from the front and changed cricket forever. As captain through the 1970s, he took Australian cricket from the old amateur era into the modern professional game. A leader who backed his gut, stood up for what was right, and built teams that played to win from ball one. In this episode, Ian shares why cricket's attacking mindset didn't start with Bazball and why he calls that whole narrative bullshit. The secret to trusting your instincts and making decisive calls under pressure. What real leadership looks like, speaking the truth even when the bosses don't want to hear it. Lessons from the dressing room, the commentary box, and a lifetime of calling it as he sees it. You'll also hear some hilarious behind-the-scenes story from the 1970s, reflection on legends like Warne, and what it takes to lead with courage, honesty, and a bit of mongrel. If you love your sport, leadership, and straight talk from one of the greats, this one's pure gold. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport as I see it is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. G'day Ian, how you going?
Yeah, good, thanks, Sam.
Mate, great to have you. Absolute honour. As a good mate of yours that I spoke to the other week, John Tapp, that's introduced me. I appreciate him doing that, and I thank you for coming on.
Pleasure, mate. No, anything for Tappy. He was a good man, or he is a good man.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've got the first Ashes test coming up in just over a week as we're recording this, and a lot of talk about England and their attacking cricket. But I always wondered what you think, given attacking cricket is something you made famous back in the 70s, and it's something you probably did. We're talking going back a long time now. How do you see all this fuss about how they're playing?
Well, there's a lot of bullshit talked about attacking cricket. I'm obviously going to talk mainly from an Australian perspective, but, to say that attacking cricket started just a couple of decades ago is bullshit. If that were true, how come Victor Trumper made 100 in a session in 1899? How come Bradman made 300 in a day in 1930?
Yeah.
McCabe was renowned as a very attacking batsman. What's his name? McCartney, renowned as an attack. Australia has always had attacking batsmen. A lot of it depends on the situation.
Of course.
It's a bit different now where batsmen, probably because they're playing a lot more short form cricket, seem to have attack as the first. There is no method of defence, so it's attack first, which is fine, but there are times when you do just have to buckle down and do the best you can. If you're getting a good spell from Jon Snow or from Andy Roberts, not much point trying to belt them out of the attack. You've just got to knuckle down and hope you get through. And so the other point I'd make is I always thought that there was only one reason for ever playing the game, and that was to try and win the game.
Yeah.
To me, it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether it was a Shield game, Test match. You're trying to win the game. Club game, you're trying to win it. I mean, cricket is not a statistical game. I didn't understand. I mean, I learned a lot about captaincy from Bill Laurie, but in my opinion, one of his failings was that he tried to get into a position where he couldn't lose, and then he'd try and win from there. And I think that's a bad way to play cricket. One of the reasons why I like Mark Taylor's captaincy is because he was trying to win from ball number one, and that to me is what you've got to do in the game of cricket. And the next load of bullshit is spoken is, and I think it's mainly a media term, about Bazball. It's not Bazball at all. It's England playing attacking batting, which is what what you can do if the circumstances are right. But I think Stokes is a good captain in a lot of areas because he tries to win from ball number one, and he's always looking to take wickets. And to me, that's the way that you've got to play the game. You've got a captain. I learned a lot about captaincy from Ray Illingworth. Illy was basically a pretty attacking captain. But the thing that stuck in my mind was that even when you thought you were on top and Illy was having to pull back a little bit, which you always do as a captain, there are times when you've got to pull back a bit. But Illy always let you know as a batsman that he was trying to get you out. And that stuck in my mind. And so I tried to do that as a captain. As I say, I think Stokes, generally, the bouncer ploy is the greatest load of rubbish I've ever seen. And it's the quickest way to wear fast bowlers out. That I don't agree with. And he has a bit of a problem getting rid of the lower order players. But I like his captaincy because he does try and win from ball number one, and he's looking for wickets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved what you said there about it's not a statistical game, because I think, like when I think about you as a commentator, you talked a lot about that, about people trying to look after their averages and stats. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was your batting, because I would imagine if you cared about averages, your average would have been much higher, except for the fact that you, again, like you said, you were always trying to win the game. So you batted for the circumstances and to win the game, not to protect an average.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed was a foreword that Ray Steele, our manager in 1972, wrote. I didn't actually write the book, but I spoke into a tape recorder and then sent the tapes back to Adelaide, and they finished up putting the book together. So it was virtually my words. But I got Ray Steele to write the foreword, and in it he said, "This is the least average conscious team that I've ever toured with." Now, Ray toured England, so that was 72. I think Ray was assistant manager in 61 and manager in 64 and then again in 72. So he went away with a few Australian teams, and one of them being Richie's team. And for him to say that our side was the least average conscious, that meant a lot to me because, I never thought about my average. There are some times when I got out and you thought you're a bloody idiot, Ian, and I thought that at the time when I got out. And you can always have a regret that I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd have done this. But I don't have too many regrets from cricket. And it was mainly, I think, because we were trying to win, every time we played.
Love it. You mentioned before about, you're talking about there's a lack of focus on defence these days. One of the things, again, me just doing a bit of research, probably misunderstood, is like just how you were known for being a great defensive player. As attacking as you played and well publicised, you loved the hook shot and you loved to get on with it if the situation was right. But it also mentioned how you got lessons from quite a young age. How important was that for you in terms of your cricket development when you came to that, like around those times when you're playing Shield and Test, having that foundation of defence?
Lynn Fuller was the coach. I I went around and Greg did the same. Lynn was a bit old by the time Trevor came along, so I think, pardon me, I think Martin, our father, probably coached Trevor as much as anyone. But I'll never forget what Lynn told me. He taught me forward and back defence. They were the first thing. Crikey, I was only 5. You couldn't learn much more than that. But what he told me at a pretty young age was that basically learn your defence, because pretty well all the other shots just flow from your defence. In other words, forward defence, if you just follow through, that becomes your cover drive, your off drive, all those sort of things. If you go back defence, and if you follow through from there, that's your back. You're forcing shots off the back foot. But so I was taught that defence at a very young age, and that's what my game was built on. And as a very young player, I was playing above my age quite a lot. And there were times when I could stay in for a long time, but I couldn't score a lot of runs because I wasn't big enough. And I think that's why I became a good puller, cutter, hooker, because I could score a bit more freely from those shots. But I'll never forget, somebody much later in life said to Lynn Fuller, Greg's defence, he praised Greg's defence. And Lynn immediately came out and said, I've coached both those two guys and I couldn't separate their defences. So we were different types of players, and I think it was one of the great advantages that we had, because Greg was 3-4 inches taller than me, so he could get on and cover balls on the front foot that I would probably play off the back foot. And I've talked to a few bowlers about this since I've retired, and I said to them, what's more difficult, to change from a right-hander to a left-hander, or to change from a front foot player predominantly, although Greg could play well and truly off the back foot, or a back foot player, which I was, but I could also play off the front foot. And they said much harder to change length to two players who were front foot player, back foot player.
Interesting.
They said it's a lot easier to change your line to a right and left-hander, but having to change your length is quite difficult. And I always saw that as one of our advantages when we're in a partnership. They had to look down the other end and say, is this a short bastard who we can't bowl short to, or is this the tall bloke we've got to, we've got to bowl a little shorter to? So to me, that was always an advantage.
Yeah, I love it. It must have been an unbelievable experience to have test batting partnerships with your brother.
It was no different to batting with Doug Walters or Ian Redpath. I mean, Greg and I never had a conversation when we were out there batting. Yeah. We might have applauded each other when they got to 50, certainly when they got to 100. That's it. We're not. I mean, what the hell are you going to talk about? Do I want to go down and say to Greg, this bloke's got the ball swinging in? He's going to know that anyhow. And the last thing he wants to hear is me telling him, watch out for the in-swinger. I mean, I had a classic example. Neil Hawke was the batsman. Hawkey had just started playing for Australia, and we were playing at the MCG, and Hawkey could bat a bit. He was quite, he got Shield hundreds. Anyhow, he came in, 7 or 8 at the MCG. I can't remember who was bowling. Might have been Jackie Potter, I think, who used to bowl a bit like John Gleeson, folded finger stuff. Yeah. And anyhow, Hawkey, instead of going to his end and taking his guard and everything, he came straight to my end. He said, what are they doing? And I said, piss off to the other end, Hawkey. It's just bowling. You tell me what they're doing. And I said, Hawkey, go down the other end. Anyhow, when we got back in, and Hawkey was a big guy, we got back in the dressing room, and Hawkey grabbed me. And he said, you little so-and-so, he said, next time I ask you what they're doing, you tell me. And I said, Hawkey, if I tell you they're bowling in swingers and the guy runs up first ball, bowling, you nick it, you get caught behind, you're not going to think very highly of me. So don't ask me what they're doing. Just play what comes down. And to me, That is the art of batting, to play what comes down. All the crap that I hear commentators talking about, you've got to look to see which side the shine on the ball, that's rubbish. You don't need to know. I mean, if a bowler's bowling with an old ball, he's probably got the old ball swinging, however it swings. But it doesn't matter how it's swing bowling. Alec Betzer said, forget this reverse swing. He said it's swing bowling, which is what it is. But the important thing is not to play what you think is coming down, play what is coming down. What if you think that the bloke's trying to bowl an in swing and the ball just goes dead straight? Play the bloody ball that comes down.
Yeah. I hope this isn't misquoted, but my school coach in Opens, he said it's a pretty simple game, and he quoted you and said the quote was just pick up the bloody bat and hit the bloody ball. Keep it simple.
I don't know. Yeah, well, keeping it simple is very true. I mean, Richie Benaud gave me a lot of good advice about a lot of different things: cricket, business, commentary, the whole lot. But I reckon I was about 19, and for some reason or other, I don't know why, but he very kindly took a shine to me, and he was always helpful. I reckon I was about 19. Richie was still playing for New South Wales and obviously Australia. And I don't know how it came up in conversation, but Richie said to me, Ian, it's a very simple game. The simpler you keep it, the better off you'll be. And it's true not only about cricket, but it's true about life. It's true about business, commentary, the whole shooting match. Don't complicate it. Just try and keep it as simple as possible, and that'll be your best method. And I guess you throw in there common sense, which can be missing at times. But I've found in my lifetime that, I've got by pretty well a hell of a lot of common sense.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that way of seeing the world, because cricket is just analysed to the minute detail now. And I know from your love of captains that were more spontaneous and flamboyant, like I wanted to know how important is gut feel and trusting your instincts as opposed to just purely going off the analytics. Like I think about how often now they spread the field instead of like maybe something more attacking, giving players a single for some particular statistic that they've seen or analyse something that they're looking for. Well, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Gut feel and trusting your instincts.
I'll come back to gut feel in a second, but here we are. If you've got a captain and batsman hits a lovely cover drive for 4 through the covers, and what does the captain do? He puts point on the boundary and he puts square leg on the boundary. I'd love to stop the game and say to him, why did you do that? Because your captaincy has got to, it's got to apply to what's going on in the game. I mean, captaincy, again, is pretty simple. I mean, wherever a guy hits the ball in the air, and that's one of your jobs as a captain, to know where guys are likely to hit the ball in the air or where you're likely to get them out. And it's very simple. You try then to get as many people as you can in the area where they're likely to hit the ball in the air, because it gives you a greater chance of taking the catch. But captaincy's got to apply to the game. The only thing I ever carried in my pocket was the bowling, and I got this from Les Favell, who was captain of South Australia before me. All he ever carried was the scorer would come down, or someone would come into your room at the end of each session, and if you were in the field, so you would get the bowling figures. So they would be the bowling figures for the day, but they would also be the bowling figures for that session. So in other words, if it's South Australia, if Wayne Pryor's bowled 10 overs, let's say it's tea time, he would come down. If Wayne Pryor's bowled 10 overs for the day and he bowled 5 in the last session, I've got that. And in fact, I don't think it was even that. It was the batting charts. That's right. That's what it was. And I hardly ever looked at them, but they were just there as a reminder for what the batsman. But people used to say to me after I'd retired, "Oh, you've got a great memory." And I said, "Mate, I was a catcher in baseball. I was a captain. You've got to have a good memory. Those two positions in particular, you've got to remember as much as possible how you get blokes out when you're catching." There's a great story. Obviously I played a lot of baseball and I love baseball and I follow the game still pretty closely. And years ago, I got a book. It was Bill James, who's a statistical guy in America. But I got the book because it's quite well written. And part of the book includes every position on the field. And it's the best 100 players in each position. So obviously I went to the catchers first because I was a catcher and I love catching. And I don't know what number he was. He was pretty decent. Gabby Hartnett. He was a pretty good catcher. Anyhow, he caught for the Chicago Cubs. And he was... They only played, I think, day games then because they hadn't got the lights. And he's dressed up waiting outside his hotel to be picked up to go to dinner. And this guy walks up in a suit and he says, "Oh, you don't remember me, but I played against you." And Gabby looked at him and he said, "I don't remember your name, but we pitch you high and outside." And I thought to myself, that's the catcher, because you have to remember how you got blokes out. The same thing when you're a captain, you have to remember how you got a fella out. I mean, if Doug Walters comes in for New South Wales, I got to remember how we got him out and give us our best chance of getting it. So, statistics, maybe they're worthwhile. I don't know. I didn't use them much. I mean, here's another classic example. Computers were just coming on the scene. It was about 88, 89, something like that. And they had a temporary commentary box in Adelaide down the Fig Tree end. And obviously I've retired and I'm working for Channel 9. And so I climb up the stairs into this temporary commentary box and I run into Peter Spence, who just started with the academy. And Peter's got his computer in front of me and he's in another room. And I just stuck my head in to say good day to him. Peter said, "Oh, this is amazing." I said, "What's that, Pete?" He said, "I'm just looking at it." He said, "Dirk Wellham has played 65% of his shots off the back foot." And I said, "That's because they're bowling short, Pete," and just moved on. Yeah, I mean, you don't need a computer to tell you, if your bowlers are bowling short, not so much now, they play pretty well everything off the front foot. But, if you're bowling short, you should be playing off the back foot. So, again, keep the bloody thing simple. Don't complicate it.
Yeah, love it. Spot on. Oh, and you were going to come back to gut feel and trusting your instincts.
Oh, yeah, gut feeling. The thing about captaincy, obviously, there's the preparation, which is your cricket knowledge, really. And, if Viv Richards walks on the ground, you say, right, now how do we get Viv out? You try and put fielders there. Fine, that's your preparation. Gut feel, you'll be standing there as a captain and maybe you haven't got a wicket for a while and right, I've got to get a wicket. And suddenly something will click in your brain and you'll think, I'll give that a go. And what I found was if it's gut feel, if it's premonition, call it whatever you want. But if it happens, do it immediately. Don't think, I'll wait a couple of overs and see. Do it immediately. If it doesn't work, then, and that's another art of captaincy, is if something's not working, you've got to then try and, fix it up or go somewhere else. But, doing that at the right time, doing it quickly or doing it at the appropriate time, that's important. But I always felt if you had a premonition, if you've got a gut feel about something, do it. Don't, will I, won't I? Don't think about it. Just do it. And if it doesn't work for a few overs, then you go back to whatever you're doing. But here again, part of captaincy is understanding what's going on out there. Now, I was lucky I was at first slip, so I've got a pretty good feel. Like if Mallett's bowling and he hasn't taken a wicket for 4 or 5 overs, but I can feel a wicket. I think to myself, there's a wicket just round the corner. So I keep Mallet going. If he's bowled 4 or 5 overs, he hasn't got a wicket, he doesn't look like getting anyone out, right, Mallet's off, I've got to get someone else on there. So again, it's all part of the process of trying to get people out. But you've got to understand as a captain, again, it is a gut feel. You have this feeling that there's a wicket just round the corner, or you have the feeling that there's nothing happening. I've got to change things here. So all those are part of captaincy.
Yeah, and you were a big fan of Warne being a captain. Was that because he came with that same thought process in terms of he saw the game in that more of attacking mindset, and he also had that gut instinct as well?
Oh, Warne would have been a terrific captain. He had all the attributes of a captain. I remember, I don't know if you remember the Super 8s. They were only around for a year or two, but they had a tournament up in North Queensland. It was winter time, so the weather was a bit better up there, and we were at Stockland Stadium, which is where the Cowboys played. But they've since moved into a new stadium, and it was Victoria versus Western Australia, and Warne was captain of Victoria. Middle of winter in Australia, so Richie, I know Richie's in England commentating for the BBC. Gets down to the last over. I reckon WA need about 6 to win and 2 wickets in hand. Now, you cannot contain the opposition. You've only got 6 fielders. You've got a bowler and a wicketkeeper. You only got 6 fielders. How are you going to contain any half-decent batting side with 6 fielders? You can't. So there was only one way for Victoria to win. They had to get the 2 wickets. So what did Warne do? He had a short cover, a short mid-off, a couple of slips. He just went on the attack. I think Damien Fleming was the bowler, and he got the 2 wickets. And it was just bloody exciting captaincy because he saw immediately there's only one way to win this game. But there can be probably quite a few that think that, but do they then follow it through? Warne followed it through. It was so exciting. I got on the phone that night when I got back home. I rang England. I rang Richie's number in England. I get hold of Rich. And I said, Rich, I've just seen some bloody brilliant captaincy. And by the way, it just happened to be by a leg spinner. And of course, Richie was over the moon about the good captaincy, but it just added to his enjoyment the fact that it was a leggy as well.
Love it.
One of the problems I had with Warne had unbelievable cricket knowledge. It used to annoy me a little bit that sometimes in his commentary, I thought he was trying to prove how good a captain he would have been. And I felt like ringing you up and saying, Warne, you don't have to prove to me that you would have been a good captain. I know you would have been. He'd have been a far better captain than Steve Waugh. He'd been a far better captain than most. I can imagine what the board would have been worried about. But, the dickheads on the board, explain to me how they didn't make Keith Miller captain. How could Ian Johnson be captain ahead of Keith Miller? Greatest joke of all time.
Yeah, wow.
Were they worried about Miller and speaking? Well, they shouldn't have worried about Nugget speaking, because I heard him speak and he was a very good speaker. The only thing that might have worried him was that he would have told the truth. Neil Harvey, why wasn't Neil Harvey captain at some stage? I think, again, same reason. Harv spoke the truth. And there are times when the board don't want to hear the truth. So, I think that's one of the reasons why Warne didn't get the captaincy, which is sad. But trust me, mate, he would have been a bloody good captain.
Yeah, I believe it. You mentioned before gut instincts and making sure you act on them at the time. Now, you've done a lot of things in your life, and one of them is business. Did you apply that same thinking to business as well? Like, you've just got a gut feel about some things and you've got to act?
I wasn't I was a journalist, really. I wouldn't class myself as a businessman. I did a little bit in business. I was only thinking about it the other day. Probably the most important thing I found in business, because you got a name, that can open a few doors. But that's all it does. It opens doors. It will not get if your product isn't the right product, it won't get someone to buy the product. It won't get someone with some common sense, won't get them to buy the product. So you really need to be able to sell the product. Because I was an ex-Australian captain, maybe that would have opened a few doors, but it needed then somebody to sell the product to whoever the doors were open to. So, but most of the principles that applied in sport, they applied in business as well, and life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you'd mentioned before about speaking the truth. You're well known for being a massive part of why the players get paid so well today. And I know there's been a lot of steps along the journey, but in those early 70s, you were big on making sure that it's called ACB back then, I guess, wasn't it? We're making a lot of money from the gate, and you guys were having to scrounge for money. You struggled to hold down jobs. Was it purely just a matter of your personal circumstances and the other players' frustration, or did that motivation to actually really speak up then come from anywhere else?
Well, firstly, I lived in a house where my mother, Jean, who was Vic Richardson's eldest daughter, she had plenty of opinions, and she was quite prepared to let you know about them. So Jean, I learned a lot of things from both Jean and Martin. But Jean in particular, I learned, tell the truth, don't bullshit, all those things. So I was one of the lucky ones, because basically by the time I started playing cricket for Australia, I was working for WD&H Wills, the tobacco company. So I was getting paid from work as well as cricket. Now, someone said to me just a few years ago, "Oh, you were a professional cricketer." I said, "Mate, piss off. $200 a test. How do you think I'm going to get rich?" But as I say, I was lucky in that. So when we went to England, let's say 72, I reckon we got paid about £2,300 for 5.5 months. Now, I was able to live on that 2,300 or whatever it was in England, and Kay, my wife, and we had a daughter, Amanda, by that stage. She was able to live on the money back in Adelaide because I was being paid. So that was fine. But then you take a guy like Ross Edwards, for instance, who had a wife and 2 children back in Perth, but the only money he was getting was the money from the board. So he had to send money back to Perth to help his wife live. So that was, I was aware of the difficulties for cricketers, and bear in mind it wasn't a bad thing having to work. It gave you less time to think about the game. So when you did think about the game, you thought about the things that you should. But there was also the problems that players had. But importantly, if you think about who's going to win you the game, you've got 11 players in your side. You as the captain are one of them. Now, if you've got 5, maybe 6 of that 11 who are going to win you the game, or they might lose you the game, they're the important ones. The other 4 or 5 people, they're going to add to, if they get 40, 50 here, they save some runs, they help you. But, the Lillees, the Marshes, Greg Chappells, Doug Walters, those sort of guys, they're the fellas that if they have a day on, they can win you the game. So a couple of things. I always wanted to make it competitive, because I felt that if it's competitive, that'll bring the best out of the best players. Because you knew that's why they were good, because they were bloody competitive. Yeah. And 2, I felt that, let's take Dennis as an example. Dennis was giving me 100% on the field all the time. And I would pretty well say that everybody that I played as a test captain, they gave me 100%. So I felt to myself, they're giving me 100% off the field. It's my job to give them 100%. Sorry, they're giving me 100% on the field. It's my job to give them 100% off the field. Now, there was no players' association, there was no managers, so it was down to the captain to do that. And I can't say that I didn't enjoy banging heads with the board from time to time, but it does wear you out. And I had 4 years as captain, and I was buggered after that. I was worn out because mostly, captaincies, if you apply Richie's theory, which is correct, it's not that difficult. Placing a field, pinning up the batting order. There's two parts to captaincy. There's leadership, which is on the field, and then there's captaincy, which is on the field. There's leadership, which is off the field. And that's the time that you spent with people, which can reap you some rewards. But that to me, that was part of my job, was to fight for the players' rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to make it particularly clear, Tony Gregg and myself get a lot of credit for World Series cricket. Dennis Lillee gets no credit, and Dennis Lillee should get the most of the credit because he was the person who really was the starter of World Series cricket.
Yeah, I heard him in an interview the other day talking about that. Someone obviously had got wind of that same story and said that, Dennis downplayed it a bit, but the person interviewing him was saying the same thing. So maybe you get more of that story out there. You mentioned leadership. I'd love to hear what you did with the team off the field to help motivate them. I know that there's an element, they're playing test cricket, they're going to be motivated, but you still have to create the right environment so that you're connected as a team, that they feel valued. What were the sort of things you did to make sure that they were going out there and playing 100% for you every week?
Well, motivation is another bit of bullshit, really. If putting on a green cap doesn't motivate you, then you're playing for the wrong team. Yeah. And I must say I was very lucky. Not only did I have a lot of good players, a lot of very competitive players, and they were easily, you didn't have to motivate them. They were motivated, and mostly they were pretty good blokes. So, I was lucky there. But one of the things I said to the guys, I don't know whether I said it right at the start of my captaincy, I can't remember, but I said to them, I want you to stay in the dressing room for an hour afterwards. I don't give a shit what you drink. If you don't drink beer, that's fine. Drink whatever you want to drink. But I would hope that you would stay for an hour, at least. And in some cases, it was more than an hour. And if I had a day in the field, I'd probably take my pants off and put a towel around me. The shirt would still be on, unless it was soaking wet. And I probably wouldn't get under the shower for a couple of hours. That was my winding down time. Now, you can talk a load of bollocks in the dressing room, but there'll be a bit of sense spoken. You can learn. I learned a lot about the game of cricket from having a beer in the dressing room with Bob Cowper, for one. I learned a lot about the mental side of batting from having a beer with Cowps. But things can be learned about your opposition as well. I'll tell you a classic story where I was vice captain, 70-71, and we're playing in Adelaide. So I don't know what it is, 4th, 5th Test match, something like that. And we used to get one big bottle of beer, 12 big bottles of beer in each dressing room. So one bottle per player. You immediately knew you had two because Bill was gone 10 minutes. I've seen Bill bat not out at stumps, come in, shower, dressed, gone, and it's 6:10. But that was Bill. He didn't like the dressing room. He didn't like hanging around. So anyhow, you knew you had that. Anyhow, we're in the we're going. It's our turn to go into England's room, and the rule used to be the first night, whoever was in the field, you would go into their room, and then you just took it alternatively from there. So this night we're in the England dressing room, which was the small dressing room at Adelaide Oval. So I walk in and I look over and I see Rodney Marsh talking to Jeff Boycott. And Rodney Marsh has got his big bottle with him, you see, and I thought, interesting combination that. And then I thought to myself, Jesus, our wicketkeeper's pretty smart. He's found a non-drinker and taken his bottle over there so he doesn't have to share the bottle. I thought, he's pretty smart. Anyhow, we eventually moved back into the Australian dressing room, and I said, Rodney, you and Jeff Boycott, eh? I said, that's interesting. He said, yeah, it is. He said, and you'll be seeing a lot more of it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm over there talking to him. He said, after 2 minutes, I don't know what the hell to talk about. So I said to him, Boykes, I said, Hampster's playing well. Hamps being Jack Hampshire, who played for Yorkshire and England, good player. And I said to him, Hampster's playing well, mate. Oh, he is, he said, but you boogers bowling wrong line to him. And Rodney said, well, what line should we be bowling? And he told me. And he said, so you're going to see me with Boycott a lot, and I'm going to give him a different name every night. And I mean, Jeffrey Boycott's the most selfish person I've ever met in my life, certainly the most selfish cricketer. But, you know, that just shows you there are things to be learnt. I mean, in 72, for instance, you know, I'm captain. I thought that Graham McKenzie, for one, should have been in that side. He wasn't. He was playing for Leicestershire. We played Leicestershire before the first test, and we've gone into the Leicestershire dressing room. Garth's there. And I knew Garth, obviously, quite a bit because I'd played a few tests with him, and terrific guy, Garth. So I said to him, mate, can we just go out on the balcony? I'd like to have a bit of a chat to you. So we go out on the balcony. I said, Garth, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through the likely English lineup, and can you tell me how you bowl to them? If you don't want to do it, just tell me to piss off, that's fine. And Garth, being the terrific guy he is, Garth said, no, that's fine. So we stood out on the balcony over a beer, and Garth went through the whole team for me. So, you know, there's all different things to be learnt. It's all part of leadership. You know, I think it helps. You know, there would have been some guy. I mean, Rodney Marsh was a very astute guy. He would have seen me go out there. He knew Garth from Western Australia. He probably had a pretty fair idea what was going on. That all helps. You know, obviously Rodney's going to talk to other people and say, Jesus, our captain's on the case. He's gone to Garth and, you know, he's finding out about the England back. So all those little things, they're all part of leadership. But in the end, I think the most important thing is that the players get to trust the decisions you're making on the field. Now, you won't always make the right decisions, but the fewer bad decisions you make, the better your chances of staying in the job. And then you had a guy, I mean, Stacky was a wonderful vice-captain. Stacky would just quietly go off and, you know, if he thought somebody needed a bit of a chat, a bit of a pat on the back, a bit of a boot, he would just quietly go off and chat with them and do all those things. Do the things that, you know, the captain hasn't always got time to do. And so he would take it on himself as a vice-captain to do those things. So that's leadership I mean, that's only minor things. But you do all of these things, and I guess it gains you a bit of respect. I was only, I don't know why, I was only thinking the other day, we played Surrey. It was a couple of games before the test match in England in 72, before the first test. And we hadn't been going all that well. I can't remember whether I'd been making many runs or not. Anyhow, Rodney and I had just had a game off, and all we'd done is play golf. Hadn't practiced cricket at all. And I go out to bat the first innings against Surrey, and I pick up the bat, and it feels like a golf stick. I'm thinking, Jesus, grips. And anyhow, I didn't get a lot. So we had to go to a function of which there are many in England, and I'll never forget, I went to Ray Steele, our manager, and Ray liked to drink. And I said, Caster, are you going back? He said, yeah, I'll be going. I said, let's go now. Oh, yeah, righto. So he got a car. We got in the car. He said, why are you going early? I said, I got to make 100 tomorrow. And anyhow, I got 100. I mean, there aren't many times when you talk about what you're going to do, because you find out in cricket that it'll bite you on the arse if you do. But I just felt that I had to. But just a little thing like that, you know, Caster obviously goes away and thinks, Jesus, you know, the captain's obviously serious. And then he's been a man of his word. He said he's got to get 100, and he's got 100. So all those little things, they help.
Yeah, it's a great one. I love that. And it's showing confidence in them, isn't it? You're confident in your own ability. You go out there and do it. Love it. You mentioned you learnt a lot from Bob Cowper about the mental side of batting. I'd love to hear some of what he told you, because this is the side that I'm most fascinated in.
Well, I was pretty young in the game. Cowps, apparently, he told me, I think after we'd both retired, Cowps, they had a Jack Ryder, who I think he captained Australia. They called him the King. And he was always Mr. Ryder or the King to the Vicks. Vicks never called him Jack. Cowps may have, because he was a bit different to a lot of the other Vicks. Anyhow, apparently Cowps is about 18 when he plays his first game, and he's sitting in the dressing room having a beer after the first day's play. And Jack Ryder comes over to him and says, son, it would be advisable for you not to sit around having a beer after a day's play. And which is fine for Jack. I mean, he didn't drink, but Cowps liked a beer. Anyhow, Cowps, being of that mind, Cowps apparently said to himself, right, I'm going to have a beer after every day's play, which he did. Anyhow, we're playing in Adelaide, we're playing the Vicks in Adelaide, and Cowps is not that much. I thought of him as a bit older than me, but he was one of those guys that I felt I could go and talk to. I mean, you didn't go looking to talk to Richie Benaud or Neil Harvey or Wally Grout, any of the Normie O'Neill, the senior players. But for some reason or other, Cowps, I felt, you know, he's sort of a similar age. Anyhow, I went and sat next, and Cowps had got 60-odd against South Australia. And I only said it to him because I'd had a couple of beers. And I said, mate, you're a bloody dib and dab player, but you always seem to get runs against us. How come? And he said, go and get a bottle of beer and we'll have a chat about it. Anyway, I came back and he said, son, he said, it's not what you look like. It's the number that goes next to your name on the board. That's what counts. And from then on, every time we played Victoria, I would always go and sit with Cowps, have a beer with him. We'd talk a lot of shit sometimes, but he was very, very good on the mental side of batting. And I learnt quite a bit about the mental side of batting from Cowps. I can remember I was pretty young, and Doug Walters had just come into the game and maybe just come into the Australian side. And, of course, he got 100 in his first test, 100 in his second test. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, shit, I got to play like Doug Walters, you see. I know, about half an hour later, I thought, Ian, you're a dickhead, mate. You don't play like Doug Walters. Why are you wanting to play like him? Play like Ian Chappell, not Doug Walters. And again, that sort of goes back to Richie, the Richie theory of keep it simple, but you've just got to be yourself, and you've got to play like yourself. Not, you know, I mean, you might learn things from other people's play, and you might use some of them in your own game, but it's got to be your game, not, you know, it was bloody. I don't know why I thought I had to play like Doug Warne, because
no one can
play like Doug Warne.
yeah.
But it was hell of efficient.
Yeah. I love that. Be yourself. Now, I know you've. You said your voice might go after a while, so if you've still got it in you, I'd love to ask you another couple of questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Specifically, a couple of series. Like you mentioned Jon Snow and Andy Roberts before, and there was two series that really stood out to me. And one was you went to the Caribbean and you were the top scorer, I believe, and the other one was the rest of the world's Test series, where you went out there and topped the batting as well. Was it almost like similar to what you said on I've got to go and score 100? Like the bigger the series, the better the bowling. Did that sort of inspire you to like really like that I really need to score runs here, or did you love the challenge? Like, what do you think that was?
Well, I wouldn't use those two as classic examples because the rest of the world attack wasn't. I didn't have Jon Snow, I didn't have Andy Roberts in it, and Andy didn't play in the Caribbean in '73. But I think I don't know whether it's probably partly captaincy. You feel a responsibility a bit more when you're captain, and if you look at my record as a batsman when I was captain and when I wasn't captain, it was a hell of a lot better. And I think in part that's the responsibility, but you also are aware that a game is on the line, or this we're either going to win or lose any draws here. And I always felt that in a situation like that, it didn't hurt my batting. I could get bored if the track was flat and the bowling wasn't much, and the game, was either easily going to be won or it didn't seem. I would get out, sometimes I'd get out. Yeah, but if I knew that the game was on the line and we needed runs, I think I was more likely to make a score then than when things were going a bit when things were a bit easy. Now, what you put that down to, partly captaincy, partly the responsibility, but also, again, as a captain, you've got to be aware that, this, the Caribbean, for instance, in '73, we won probably the second best Test match I ever played in at Trinidad. And the West Indies needed 66 with 5 wickets in hand at lunch on the last day, and we finished up winning by 44.
Wow!
It was a hell of a good victory. I twisted my ankle, I think 2 days before the Test. I was playing tennis against Johnny Benaud at the Queen's Park tennis courts and twisted my ankle, and I was really struggling. And as I discovered later, I made the mistake of batting at 6 in the first innings, where I discovered really what you should do is just bat in your normal position. But I thought, I won't be able to use my feet. So I sent Greg in at 3 and Dougie at 4. Actually, it worked because Doug got 100 in a session. But then that was done. But in the second innings, I decided, I was still struggling a bit with my ankle, but I decided to bat at 3. And I got 97 or 98 in that innings. And by that stage, you knew that the game was on the line. And I think I felt I've got to find a way to score runs here. So that was a good example of feeling like I've got to do something here. And again, it helps the captain gain a bit more respect on the field. If they think, when the shit was hitting the fan, he was in there doing the best he could. That gives you a bit more credibility with the players.
Yeah, I love it. You said second best Test. What was the best Test you played in?
The Oval, 72. That was the best Test. We wasn't quite as close. It was bloody close, but that was to me, that was a watershed test. That was the test, in my opinion, that convinced us, the Australian team, that we could win any game under any circumstances, because it finished up being a 6-day game. We had to battle like hell. We had to get 240 to win on the 5th and 6th day. We got them with 5 down, but it was a battle the whole way through. And we got contributions from a lot of different people. A lot of different people, worked bloody hard to win that game. But importantly, to me, that was the watershed test that convinced us we can now beat anybody in any circumstance. And from then on, we were pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, love it, as history would show too. Before you go, I wanted to hear a little bit about Wide Water Sports and Sports Sunday. Tappy was saying just how much fun those days were. Can you share a little bit about that, maybe a story just about what a great experience that was for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was totally different because I knew bugger all about television. So I had to learn about television. I was very lucky to have David Hill and Brian Morelli. David Hill, producer, Brian Morelli, director. So I learned a hell of a lot about television from them. The whole staff. It was at the end of Wide World of Sports, we'd go down to the Bridgeview Hotel. We'd have a beer or two, and we'd talk. Why was that segment good? Why was that crap? And we'd go through it all. We'd do similar sort of things after the cricket. Hilly, certainly one night, maybe two sometimes, we'd go back to his room or Morelli's room, and we'd talk about what was good, what wasn't so good, why, how it could be better. So, I learned a hell of a lot about television from those people. And then, I knew nothing about horse racing. I still know nothing about horse racing. But I thought to myself, right, we've got Johnny Tapp and Kenny Callender, two pretty good racing men. They understand the game. So every Saturday, I was talking to Tappy about it the other day. I said, you had a radio program, didn't you? He said, yeah. And I used to listen to that radio program, and usually it'd be when I'm driving to the studio Saturday mornings. And Tappy would go through the card for that day, talk about his tips, so that I would get something from that chat, so that if it was my turn to toss to Tappy at the races, I'd at least have something that I knew that he was interested in or that he'd talked about. So I wasn't asking him a totally stupid question. So, I learned from Tappy, I learned from Kenny Callender, I learned a hell of a lot from Mike Gibson, sitting next to Gibbo. What you discover is it's a hell of a lot better if you're mates, because I had 8 years with Gibbo, and I knew his history as a writer and radio. And I learnt some things about writing from Gibbo, because I've been basically a journalist since '73. I've written all my own stuff, and so I learnt things from Gibbo. You just learn all these things. As I say, the staff would all come down to the Bridgeview, and you'd learn. You never knew who you were going to learn from, but you would learn things. And here again, I think that's where cricket played its part. As a captain, you learnt things, and you understood how you've got to learn things, you've got to acquire knowledge. And so I was always listening for anything I could glean on television from those people. I've always said that probably the most interesting thing in life is the acquiring of knowledge. And second most interesting thing in life is the passing on of knowledge. It's not much good having a whole pile of knowledge if you don't get the opportunity to pass some of it on. So, I guess, and I guess you've got to be, as a journalist, you've got to have, in part, an inquiring mind, and I was lucky. The one subject that I was really interested in school was English, which was fortunate, being a journalist. And secondly, I was lucky that, I had a reasonable memory. And third, that I had an inquiring mind. All those things help not only journalism, but learning about television. And the other thing about, what Tappy says is dead right, because, we had a lot of fun together. And sure, there was some hard work, but there was also fun to be had. And you learn things. For instance, I discovered that Mike Gibson had been employed as a writer on Wide World of Sports. And then just before, on the Friday night, I think, before the first show, David Hill, our producer, thought, Jesus, Ian's going to be sitting there for 4 hours. You're sitting there on your own with no one to talk to. That's bloody difficult. I need to give him someone to talk to. And so that's when he decided to make Gibbo a presenter on the show as well. And apparently Sam Chisholm said Hilly must have told him. Sam Chisholm said on the Friday night before the first show, he said, if you put Mike Gibson on air, I'll sack both of you. And Hilly went ahead and put him on air, and obviously neither of them got sacked. But I learnt years later how much shit that Hilly protected us from. Kerry could, blow up very quickly and fucking sack him, and Hilly protected us from a lot of that sort of stuff. I mean, that's not to say that Kerry knew probably more about television than anyone, but he could fly off the handle a bit, and fucking sack him was one of the first things. But Hilly protected us from a lot of that, but Hilly wouldn't have protected you if he didn't think you were worth protecting.
No.
So all those things, were part of the learning process, but they also contributed to the fun. Go on.
Oh, you go. Keep going.
Probably the funniest. Well, it wasn't funny at the time, but there's always something funny. So Hilly told me two things when I started in television. He said, treat every microphone as being live. And he said, there are 4 words that you don't say on television. Well, I managed to swear in front of the microphone, and I managed to get 3 of those 4 words into one sentence. And anyhow, so I'll never forget, Stewie Richmond is the producer of Wide World of Sports. He comes running out because it was in the break where Melbourne went to another program. Sydney stayed for the final 2 hours. Anyhow, Stewie's come rushing out, and he said, that went to air. I said, what? He said, what you just said. Oh, okay. And I can't remember, I think it was Stewie said, you better come off air. And Channel 9 was smart, was smart. They took me off air, and they said, you've got 2 weeks off. So they punished me straight away, thinking it's better that we punish him rather than leaving it to the tribunal. So that was smart.
Yeah, good.
Anyhow, I discovered later, because I drove home. We lived at Neutral Bay in those days, and Barb was painting. So I got home, I don't know, 3:30 instead of 7 o'clock. I walk in and Barb said, what are you doing? I said, it's been a small problem. But what I discovered later on, Saul Stein was one of our young producers, and a very good one. Went on to the Channel 7, Fox Sports. Had a very, very good career, probably still has. Anyhow, Saul, they only had one person on the telephone on a Saturday because it wasn't that busy. But I also discovered later on that somebody from the Festival of Light or whatever that mob is, they would listen, and if they heard anything on television, they would then ring around, so people would start ringing in complaining about what was said. So anyhow, Saul
Yep.
had to go and help answer the phones because the phones are bloody ringing off the hook, you see. So Saul and Mike Gibson had to apologise for my language, you see. And Gibbo, I remember talking to him later on, Gibbo said, "I'm really pissed off with you." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I had to call you Mr. Chappell." He said, "I've never called you that before in my life." Anyhow, Saul goes down to grab one of the telephones, and this guy rings up, Channel 9 here. "How can I help you?" "You got to tell that Chappell to apologise," you see. No, Channel 9's already apologised. There won't be any more. Why do you want an apology? He said, "Well, it's pretty simple." He said, "I played golf this morning." He said, "I had a few beers after golf. I get back home and my wife's been doing the ironing and looking after the kids. And she said, 'You take the kids in that bloody spare room. I've had a gutful of the kids. You look after them,' you see." So he said, "I go in there and I've had a few beers." So he said, "I'd fall asleep. And suddenly my wife comes rushing in and says, 'Don't you swear like that in front of the children,' you see." And the guy says, "It wasn't me. It came out of the television," you see. And the wife whacks him. Says, "Not only do you swear in front of the kids, but you're a liar as well," you see. And he said, "That's why I need an apology."
Oh, outstanding.
There's always, even in the worst moments, there's always a funny side.
Yeah, absolutely. What you described around what David Hill did, like that, to me, that's another example of great leadership. Just by covering up and making sure you're looking after his staff. I crossed over with Saul when I was at Fox Sports in my early days, and he might have adopted some of those things from Kerry, because I remember that was the thing, is like, you just want to make sure you don't do anything wrong in front of Saul, because he might be prone to just saying fire him. So I remember living in fear of Saul in those early days.
Yeah, Saul was very, very talented. Or is
he was,
very
is,
talented guy.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd love
And
to
Hilly,
hear just...
Hilly was a good leader. Hilly was a bloody good leader. Yeah.
I'd love to just hear some self-indulgence from you. Is there one innings that stands out for you where just everything clicked and you remember coming off thinking, "Man, I couldn't have batted any better than that"?
I don't recall many innings, because I don't think they're that important. To me, what was important was, did we win the game or did we lose it? But I think probably the most important innings, wasn't my best, but most important innings I played was at the Oval in 72. So we'd played the first test at Old Trafford. It was a seamer's paradise, seamed all over the place. I hit the best hook shot I've ever hit. Greggy came in, Stacky and Bruce Francis opened the batting. They put on 69. There were 3 drop catches in 3 balls.
Right.
England had forgotten to pick slip fielders. Anyhow, so 3 catches went down the slips, then someone gets out, probably Francis. So I come in and I'm facing up, and Greggy bounces me first ball. As I say, best hook shot I've ever hit. I hit it absolutely flat. If I'd tried to hit it up, it would have finished in the Warwick Road train station. But I hit it flat, and it carried all the way. And go back to Saul again. Saul was apparently sitting in the crowd, he told me, many years later, as a 10, 11-year-old kid. And he said, "This ball's coming," and I'm standing up thinking I'm going to get a catch here. And he said, Mike Smith reached up full height and caught the bloody thing with his heels against the rope. So I'm out first ball for naught.
What?
And at Old Trafford, the pitch was the other way in those days. So I had to go off past point to the pavilion. And Lillee, the opposing captain, was standing at point. And as I went past him, Lillee said to me, "Oh, fucking good shot for naught, son," which didn't improve my sense of humour. But when I think back on it later on, you think, well, I guess it's a bit of a tribute from the opposing captain. So anyhow, I've got naught. Second innings, we're batting fourth, obviously. I think we've got to get about 350. Francis is out cheaply again. Stacky's got a few. Pardon me, I'm about 7, I reckon. But the track is just dying. It's starting to flatten out. Late on the 4th afternoon. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a pretty good track now. And I never, ever, and I don't know why to this day that I did it, but I never go and talk with my partner. End of the over, I go down to Stacky. I said, Stack, if we're still here at Stumps, we'll get these. So I go back. Snowy bounces me. I go to hook it, miss the bloody thing, but on the hook, it just flicked the peak of my cap. And you know how you swivel around on the hook shot. So I swivel, and I'm looking at that silly old Tommy Spencer, the umpire, and the peak's over here, which should have been a bit of a giveaway. And he gives me out, caught behind. Never hit it. So anyhow, that's fine. And Rodney got 91, which was a very important innings. He belted the crap out of the England bowlers. And I remember thinking to myself, Rodney's our number 7. If he can do that, we as batsmen have got to start doing things. So anyhow, I go, next game, we're playing the next day. This was one of the shit parts of Test cricket in those days. We're playing the next day. We're playing combined universities. And I decided I'd open the batting to get a bit of practice against the new ball, probably get a few bounces. There's a left armour, I think his name was Manning, opened the bowling. And he's got a bloke back on the boundary, and I think he might have had 2 back. And I thought to myself, these pricks think they're going to bounce me. Anyhow, I can't remember what happened there. Next over is bowled by an absolute medium pacer. John Spencer went on to play a bit later on for Sussex. He is a dead set medium pacer. I'm on strike and I look around and he's got 2 blokes back on the hook shot. And I remember thinking, fuck you, mate. If you bowl short, you're going. So he dropped one short and I hit it. Didn't even bother to try to hit it down. And it landed on the roof of the tent. And I don't know whether I said anything or not, but I felt like saying, you bowl any more of that shit and it'll finish up the same. Anyway. So, sorry.
You're good.
All right, we'll just hang up here. So then I get, you know, those blue aerograms. I get a blue aerogram from my grandmother, not Vic's wife. This is Dorothy, my father's mother. And Dorothy does not know the first thing about cricket. And I must admit, I didn't have a great deal of time for Dorothy's opinions. Anyhow, she writes in this aerogram, everyone's saying you should give up hooking, love. Why don't you think about giving up hooking? And I'm thinking to myself, if my grandmother's telling me to give up hooking, that's a good reason to hook. So we practiced the day before at Lord's, and Jeff Hammond played for South Australia. And I used to get him to bounce me a bit in the Adelaide Oval nets. Les Favell hated it. Les didn't want bounces in the nets. Now, it was all right for Les. Maybe he didn't have to practice the hook shot. I needed to practice it. And I used to say to Les, I've spoken to Bomber, and I'd always pick a night where the sun was out, the light was good, and I'd say to Bomber, give me a working over, mate. And I got Bomber because he was very accurate, and he would do that. So here we are at Lord's, and I said, as I go into the nets, I said, Bomb, give me a working over. So Bomb's bowling me, not all bounces, but a mixture of bounces. And I can hear the mob behind the nets. Oh, even your bloody mates are bouncing you, you know. So I'm pretty well convinced I'm going to bloody hook. Anyhow, I'm sitting waiting to go in. Stacky and Bruce Francis open the batting. I'm sitting there waiting to go into bat. Who walks into the bloody dressing room but Ken Barrington? Now, I've played a few tests against Kenny. Nice guy. He walks over, he sits down next to me. He says, Ian, perhaps you better think about, I think he used the word eschewing. Eschewing the hook shot until you're 50. Yeah, sure, Ken. Thanks, mate. Off he goes. And I'm thinking, I've got a fucking Englishman telling me to give up hooking. That's another reason to hook. So anyhow, Francis gets out. I go in, and I'm still, and this is where I got into trouble. Simpson, anyone who tells you Simpson was a good coach is talking through his hat. Simpson was no good at batting, because if you didn't bat like Bob Simpson, you weren't a good player in his opinion. He told me to give up hooking in South Africa when he was captain. And the worst thing is I didn't give up hooking, but it got me in the will I or won't I, which is worse. I'd get in a position to hook and then wouldn't hook. Anyhow, I get in a shit position and Snowy hits me at Lord's. And now I'm thinking, right, if I'm going to cop some pain, I'm going to hand some out.
Yep.
And I got lucky because Snowy bowled from the nursery end. He should have always come from the pavilion end down the hill. Anyhow, for some reason or other, he wanted to bowl at the other end. And they'd picked John from Middlesex. John, I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyhow, they'd picked him obviously because he liked bowling bounces. And he used to, because Sunday League, they used to have the 10 metre or 10-yard runner. So John Price, that's him. He used to run from side on because he wouldn't go back any further than 10, but he'd get to 10 and he'd take his run up over there. So he'd come in and then down the hill. And he bounced the shit out of me. I got 56, and I reckon I got about 44 of them hooking. I hit a 6 as well as a lot of 4s. And to me, it was very important for myself to convince myself that I'm a hooker. I've got to go on hooking.
Yep.
But I think if I'd have backed down and started bobbing and weaving, it would have had an adverse effect on the team. They might have thought, oh, shit, the Poms have got through to our skipper and he's, So I only got 56. Greg went on and got 132, which played a big part in us winning the game. But I always thought that 56 was crucial for me mentally, but also for the team. So I would say that was my most important innings as captain.
I love it. Similar to what you described before, it sounds like your best work always came when you were being true to yourself, being true to who you were, rather than trying to do things that what other people said.
Yeah, again, that sort of came from my parents. Martin obviously a bit as well, Jean in particular, but Martin as well. And how I became a hooker, Martin was a very good club cricketer, topped the aggregate in 50-51, so he could play. Yeah. He played 2 Claxton Shield series for South Australia as a catcher.
Yep.
So he's a good sportsman. I reckon I was about 8 or 9, something like that. And Lynn Fuller had been bowling to me and teaching me defence and all that sort of business. Anyhow, I used to bat for about an hour against Lynn, and Lynn was a very accurate bowler, and you'd get good practice. Anyhow, this day I walk out of the nets after an hour. Martin comes down, he says, go back in the nets. And because Lynn, he had a half pitch, 11-yard pitch, so it was top dressed. So there was this rise at the halfway mark because of the top dressing and everything. Yeah. Martin, obviously, South Australian baseball catcher, so he had a good arm and an accurate arm. And he just said, get back in the nets, and I think he said, defend yourself or whatever he said. There was never any talk about ducking, bobbing, weaving, whatever. He just said, get back in the nets. I'm going to throw you some bounces. And Martin, here's another thing that I learnt, that you've got to take a bit of a run-up because you've got to get in sync with the person's run-up. So he'd run a couple of paces, boom, onto this rise, and I'd get these bounces. So I, as I say, don't ever recall ducking, or I might have had a go at a couple and missed them, but always playing shots at them. So that's how I learnt to hook and to pull. And to me, it was a natural shot. I got hit in the head once, and I'll never forget it. We were playing junior Colts, because Prince Alfred College used to play in B grade, and senior Colts were in A grade, junior Colts B grade. And they were wet pitches all week. It had rained, the pitches were all wet. So if someone bowled short, you'd have to sit there, wait, and then boom, play the shot. So stupidly, I must have, and it had dried out by the Saturday. We're playing at Prince Alfred College. Stupidly, I must have waited. Anyhow, this guy, he was a medium pacer. He wasn't quick at all. He's bowled the bounce, and I've waited too long, obviously. Bang, and it hit me right in the eyebrow, split the eyebrow. And the worst thing is, not only do I have blood all over me, but I think I fell on the stumps, or the ball hit the stump. Anyhow, I was out hit wicket. Right. So now I'm really pissed off. I've got blood all over me, and I'm out. And so I had to go to hospital, and they stitched it up, but they put a Band-Aid over it. So I can see this, it's in the front eye. I can see this bloody Band-Aid, you see. So I think I'm 15. And we got house cricket Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I don't know whether I said to Martin, I don't know if I'll be able to play house cricket. You'll play, son. I said, yeah, but I got this banner, you'll play. So he makes me play. And we were playing the schoolhouse, who were all the mad boarders, and they had all the mad quickies, and they bounced the shit out of me. We played at on the PAC number 2 ground. I got 63, and they just bounced the shit out of me. And I remember some of them top edges going over the top. But it was the best lesson I ever got, because, Martin's theory was you've got to get back on the horse, and as quickly as possible. And it was a bloody good lesson, because it taught me that you don't worry about, okay, you're injured, you just play. So that was part of it, but also that getting back on the horse was very, very important. And as I say, I don't ever recall thinking that I wasn't a hooker or a puller. But you see, here's an interesting thing. You remember when Philip Hughes got killed at the SCG?
Yeah.
And Cricket Australia had a review to try and make things a bit safer.
Yeah.
Which is, that's fine, good idea. So anyhow, I'm commentating somewhere, and I run into James Sutherland, who is CEO of Cricket Australia. So I said to James, this review you're having, James, does it include technique? And his answer was, I don't know. He's the chairman of Cricket Australia. I don't know. I said, well, James, could you please find out, and could you let me know? Never heard another word from him. So eventually I ran into Steph Beltrami, who was the media liaison person. And Steph was really good. She was always around a lot. And she understood cricket a bit, played a bit of women's cricket. So I said to her, told her what had happened, and I said, do you know if it's part of the review? She said, I don't know. I said, well, could you please find out and let me know? Yes, certainly. Which she did. She found out, and she came back to me and she said, it's not part of the review. I said, Steph, that's the greatest load of bullshit I've ever heard. I said, Greg and I played, who knows, 160 tests between us. Neither of us ever got hit in the head on the test field.
Yeah.
There must be a reason for that. And it was technique, because we had the right technique. Now, surely, if you're going to try and improve safety, technique's got to play a big part in it. So, I don't have I've never had much sympathy for Cricket Australia, because I think they're basically a bunch of dickheads. But, that was just abysmal.
Yeah. It's such a foundational piece of any sport, is to making sure you've got the technical aspect covered away first. It's crazy. Thank you for coming on, Ian. I know you said you might not be able to get to an hour. We've done an hour and 20. I appreciate it so much for you really pushing your voice to the limit. telling it how it is, speaking your truth, but also passing on, like you said, the importance of not only gaining knowledge, but passing it on. And I appreciate for all the wonderful stories and knowledge you've passed on today, mate. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, Ian. Thanks for that.
Cheers. There's a lot to take from that chat with Ian Chappell, not just about cricket, but about life and leadership. The way he backs his instincts, spoke his truth, and led with integrity is a reminder that high performance isn't about playing safe. It's about trusting yourself and having the courage to act. Whether you're leading a team, a family, or just trying to improve your own game, there's gold in how Chappell approached purpose, pressure, and people. If something from today hit home, think about how you can build it into your own life game plan. And share this episode with a mate who'd value the same lessons. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.